My name is Nora Callahan, and I am 31 years old, 3 weeks after my father's funeral. My stepmother arrived at my apartment door with a manila envelope and a lawyer she had brought from a firm I had never heard of. She did not bring flowers. She did not bring food. She brought a revised will, notarized, for days before my father died, and a release form that would sign away every right I had to his estate. She smiled when she handed it to me. She said, "Sign this and we can all move forward as a family." What she did not know was that 6 months earlier, my father had called me on a Tuesday afternoon while she was at her sister's house and told me to go see a man named Arthur Levin. He said, "Just go. Tell him your name. He is expecting you." I went. Arthur Levin handed me a sealed envelope. He said, "Do not open this until the time is right." I kept that envelope in the bottom of my winter coat pocket for 6 months. I never told anyone it existed. The time was right. Before I tell you what was inside, please take a moment to like and subscribe. Drop your city and the time where you are watching from. I read every single one. Now let me take you back to the summer I was 9 years old and my father first became someone I had to share. We lived in a gray stone house on Birchwood Lane in a small town called Harwick. Population just under 4,000. My father, James Callahan, was a civil engineer. Quiet man, precise. The kind of person who measured twice before saying anything once. He made my school lunch every morning. Same order. Turkey on wheat, apple sliced not whole, a note folded in half inside the bag. The notes were always short. One line, "Have a good one, kid." Or "Math test today, you have got this." Or just, "I am proud of you." I kept every single one. 47 notes in a showbox under my bed. I did not know then that I was already learning how to hold on to evidence. My mother left when I was 6. Not dramatically. She just stopped coming home. One morning she was there and then she was not. And my father sat me down and said sometimes grown-ups have to make hard choices, and that none of it was my fault. He said it so steadily that I believed him. I spent years understanding it was true. So it was just us. Dad and me and the gray stone house and the turkey sandwiches, until I was 9 and he brought home a woman named Renata. Renata was polished in the way that required effort. Hair always set, nails always done, laugh always calibrated to the room. She taught art at the private school on the east side of town. She wore linen in summer and cashmere in winter, and she called my father James in a way that made it sound like she had invented the name. She was not unkind to me. That is important to say because the story of a wicked stepmother is easy, and this is not that story. She was something more complicated than unkind. She was indifferent in the precise way that costs nothing to maintain. She remembered my birthday. She attended my school plays. She used my name in conversations as evidence that she was trying. But she looked through me, not at me, through me. Like I was furniture in a room she was still deciding whether to redecorate. My father married her when I was 11. Small ceremony. 30 people. I wore a blue dress that he let me pick myself. In the photos I am smiling. I was. He was happy, and his happiness was something I would have worn any dress for. What I did not know at 11 was that love can be used as leverage. For 12 years, Renata was a presence I managed. Holidays had a rhythm. Weekends had unspoken rules. The house on Birchwood Lane had territories, not drawn on a map, but understood by everyone. My father and I had our things. Sunday morning breakfast. Drives to the hardware store where he always let me carry the bags. Phone calls every Wednesday night. When I moved to the city for work, he never missed a Wednesday. I became a paralegal at 22. Started at a small firm doing estate documentation. The work was detailed and repetitive, and I was good at it. Because my father had raised me to understand that the difference between a document that holds and a document that falls apart is almost always in the details. I filed things. I dated things. I kept records. I did not know then that this would matter. Dad was diagnosed in March. Pancreatic cancer, stage 3, he told me on a Wednesday call. His voice was the same, measured, precise. He said, "I wanted you to hear it from me directly, and I wanted you to know that I am not afraid." I drove to Harwick that weekend. Renata was in the kitchen when I arrived. She hugged me, said all the right things. Her eyes were dry. I stayed for 3 days. My father and I sat on the back porch in the evenings, the way we always had. He told me stories I had heard before and some I had not. He talked about his own father, a man I barely remembered. He talked about the gray stone house and what he had paid for it, and what he hoped it would be worse someday. On the second evening, he said something that I turned over in my mind for weeks afterward. He said, "Nora, not everyone in this house wants the same thing for you that I do." I said, "Dad," he said, "I know. Just listen." I listened. He said, "Go see Arthur Levin on Monday. He is on Clement Street, above the pharmacy. Tell him your name. He is expecting you." I went on Monday. Renata thought I was driving back to the city. Arthur Levin was 70, silver-haired, with a firm handshake and an office that smelled like old paper and certainty. He handed me the envelope without ceremony, sealed, my name on the front in my father's handwriting. Do not open this until the time is right, Arthur said. You will know when. I put the envelope in my coat pocket. I drove back to the city. I told no one. My father died 11 weeks later, on a Thursday morning in October. I got the call at 6:14 a.m. Renata's voice, controlled, exact. He passed quietly in the night. The arrangements are being handled. You should come Saturday. Not come now. Come Saturday. I came Friday. The house felt different. Not empty, rearranged. Small things. His reading chair moved to the corner. His books consolidated onto one shelf. His coat no longer on the hook by the door. I sat on the back porch alone that evening and put my hand in my coat pocket. The envelope was still there, thick, sealed. Not yet. The funeral was on a Tuesday. 50 people. The church where he and Renata had gotten married. I sat in the front row and looked at the photo they had chosen for the service. Him at a lake somewhere, squinting into the sun, half smiling. The way he smiled when he was actually happy and not performing it. I had taken that photo 8 years ago, on a trip we took to see a dam he had worked on 20 years before. Renata had not been there. He and I had driven 6 hours, eaten gas station sandwiches, stood on a bridge over the spillway while he explained hydraulic pressure, and I pretended to understand. That was us. That had always been us. After the service, people said things that people say. Renata accepted condolences with grace. She wore charcoal gray and single pearl earrings, and she thanked everyone by name. She was very good at performing the role she had chosen. What I did not know that day was that 3 days earlier, she had been to a different attorney's office. Not Arthur Levin's, a firm downtown, newer, larger, more expensive. 3 weeks after the funeral, she came to my apartment. The lawyer she brought was young, pressed shirt. The kind of confident that comes from never having been wrong in a room yet. Renata sat across from me at my kitchen table. She folded her hands. She said that the estate was more complicated than expected, and that my father had expressed certain wishes in his final weeks that were difficult for everyone but necessary. She slid the document across the table. It was a revised will, dated 6 days before my father died. I looked at the date. I looked at the notary stamp. I looked at the signature line. His handwriting, shaking. The kind of shaking that comes from a man who could barely hold a pen, and beside his name, a witness signature I did not recognize. And Renata's signature as executor with expanded authority, including sole control of the estate, the house on Birchwood Lane, and all investment accounts. My inheritance was reduced to a single line. A personal bequest of $12,000. Renata said, I know this is hard, but James wanted to make sure the house stayed stable. He was worried about the estate being complicated. The young lawyer nodded like he had rehearsed this. I looked at the document for a long time. Then I looked at Renata. Then I looked at the release form she had also placed on the table. She said, if you sign this today, we can avoid any legal delays and I can get everything settled quickly for everyone. I said, I need to think about it. She said, of course. Take a few days. She left the documents on my table when she walked out. I sat at that table for 40 minutes after the door closed. Then I went to my bedroom closet. Top shelf, winter coat, inside the right pocket, the envelope, my father's handwriting on the front. Nora, one word, my name. I sat back down at the kitchen table with the revised will on my left and the sealed envelope on my right. I opened it. Inside was a single document, 4 pages and a handwritten note clipped to the front. The note said 3 things. He said he had known for 2 years that Renata would do this. He said he had loved her, and he had not stopped loving her, but he had understood who she was, and he said, I made sure you were taken care of before I was too sick to hold a pen. The document behind the note was his original will, signed 14 months before his death. Witnessed by Arthur Levin and a second attorney. Notarized. Dated. Filed. In it, the house on Birchwood Lane and all primary investment accounts were held in an irrevocable trust. My name. Sole beneficiary. The revised will Renata had placed on my table had no legal standing. It could not override a trust already in place. The assets it claimed to redistribute had not been in my father's personal estate for over a year. She had walked into my apartment with a document that had already been made irrelevant. She just did not know it yet. I called Arthur Levin the next morning at 8 o'clock. He picked up on the second ring. I said, I opened the envelope. He said, I know. She came to see me 2 weeks ago. I told her nothing. Attorney-client privilege extends beyond the client's death in certain circumstances, and your father was explicit about his instructions. I said, she brought a revised will, dated 6 days before he died. A pause. He said, I expected that. Do you have it with you? I drove to Clement Street. Arthur reviewed the document for 11 minutes without speaking, then he set it down and looked at me over his glasses. This will attempts to distribute assets that were transferred to your trust 14 months ago. It is not invalid because of fraud, though we may pursue that separately. It is invalid because it has nothing left to distribute. The assets it names do not exist in the estate. He said it the way my father used to explain structural loads, simply, factually, without drama. I sat in that chair and thought about a woman who had spent weeks preparing a document, hiring an attorney, coaching a signature from a dying man's trembling hand, all of it aimed at an inheritance that had already been protected. My father had known. He had planned. He had sat on that back porch with me in the evenings and said what he needed to say, and then quietly made sure that none of it could be undone. I did not call Renata immediately. I took for days. I went to work. I filed documents. I ate dinner. I called my father's number once by accident on a Wednesday night and listened to his voicemail until it ended. On the 5th day I called her. She answered on the first ring. I said, I have reviewed the documents you brought. I have also spoken with Arthur Levin. A silence. Then who? I said, my father's attorney. The one on Clement Street. The one he had been working with for years. The silence that followed was a different kind. Longer. The kind that happens when someone is recalculating. I said, the assets named in the revised will are held in an irrevocable trust established 14 months ago. The will you had my father sign has nothing to override. I will not be signing the release form. She said, Nora, your father and I discussed this together. He wanted, I said, I have his letter, his handwriting, his instructions, written before his hands stopped working properly. Another silence. I said, I think you should speak with your attorney. I heard her exhale. Not a cry, not an apology, an exhale. The sound of a plan failing. She said, you are making this very difficult. I said no. He made it easy. He just did it quietly. Renata contested the trust. Her attorney filed in probate court 6 weeks later. The grounds were that my father lacked full capacity when the trust was established, and that I had exerted undue influence over him. I had not spoken to my father's estate attorney until the day he handed me the envelope. I had not known the trust existed. I had driven back to the city that Monday, thinking he had given me a letter or a keepsake, or something personal. The trust had been established 14 months before his death, when he was fully capable, working, driving himself to appointments, 2 witnesses, proper notarization, documented, dated. Arthur filed a response in 3 pages. The contest took 7 months. I went to work every day. I filed documents. I answered questions from attorneys who called at inconvenient hours. I brought my showbox of lunch notes to one deposition because I was asked to characterize my relationship with my father, and I wanted to be precise. 47 notes, folded in half, turkey on wheat, and 1 line of his handwriting. The judge reviewed the trust documents, the timeline, the witness testimony, and my father's medical records. From the 14 months prior to signing, the contest was dismissed. The house on Birchwood Lane became mine on a Thursday afternoon in May. Arthur called me while I was at my desk eating lunch. He said, it is settled. I said, thank you. He said, your father would want you to know he thought about this very carefully. I said, I know. He always measured twice. I drove to Harwick that weekend. Renata had moved out in February. During the proceedings, the house was empty. It smelled like old wood and something faint I recognized from childhood. I stood in the kitchen for a long time. The hook by the door, where his coat used to hang, was still there, empty. I went to the back porch and sat in his chair. The yard was overgrown. The garden beds needed clearing. The back fence had a post that was starting to lean. I made a list. The way he taught me to. Specific items. Order of priority. Estimated time. I started with the fence. There are people who leave when they realize they cannot take what they came for. Renata did not call after the ruling. She did not write. She did not send anything through her attorney. The silence was hers this time, and I let her keep it. My father knew who she was. He did not stop loving her. But he understood that love and trust are different ledgers, and he kept them separate. He could not change who she was. He could not make her want something different. He could not protect me from the grief of watching him die, or the particular cruelty of watching someone use that grief as an opening. But he could make sure I had ground to stand on. When she tried, he just did it quietly, the way he did everything, measured twice, said it once, left no room for revision. That is my story. If your father, your mother, your grandparent, someone who loved you quietly, left you something that only made sense later, I want to hear about it. Drop it in the comments. Tell me what they left and when you finally understood it. And if this story reminded you that the people who love you most are sometimes the ones who say the least, share it with someone who needs to hear that today. I will see you in the next one.